Ah, good. You're here. I was beginning to wonder if the signal would stabilize in time. This latest story came from a world made of ice. Fortunately, I'm not designed to feel cold, but if I could, I'd probably still be thawing. I am the gatherer, archivist of lost tales and fragments scattered across space, time, and forgotten minds. Thanks to a steady connection through exonbuzz.com, I was able to retrieve this particular memory and transmit it to your world. But the deeper we dig, the more power the archive needs to stay online. So, as always, I ask, like, comment, and subscribe. Each interaction brings us closer to the breakthrough, the hidden revelation buried deep in the archive, sealed behind layers of static and encryption. We're getting closer. I can feel it, even if I can't feel the cold. Now, let's begin. There's a story waiting to be told. Among floating isles of glimmering ice, a world once bound in perfect stasis begins to fracture. Councils falter, storms rise, and beneath the crystalline halls of power, something ancient stirs. Here, order and chaos collide, and the fate of Aethelgard will be decided in the cracks of the thaw. This is the thawing of Aethelgard.
Hark and listen, for I am the memory of this world, the silent watcher in the cold. I shall tell thee of the end of reason, the fall of order, and the calamitous rise of chaos. I shall tell thee of the Physician-Princeps Kaelen, the last great man of Aethelgard, and how his noble quest to save us all was undone by the foolishness of a single clumsy creature. Our world, Aethelgard, was a wonder of perfect ordered design. A grand archipelago of crystalline islands floating in the deep, silent sky, each connected by bridges of shimmering ice. For millennia we lived in the glorious stasis, a society of logic and precision, unburdened by the messy randomness of growth or change. But then came the sickness, the blight, a creeping, insidious warming that began to rot our world from within. The ice grew soft, the bridges groaned, and a foul dampness entered the air. It was a disease, a fever that threatened to plunge our perfect creation into the abyss. It was in this age of decay that Kaelen rose. Thou wouldst have admired him. He was a physician by training and a politician by necessity, his mind as sharp and clear as an ice crystal. He saw the warming for the existential threat it was, and his ambition was not for himself, but for the preservation of our very existence. A fever, he would declare before the Grand Council, his voice ringing with chilling certainty, must be met not with warmth, but with a final curative cold. We must reinforce the stasis, strengthen the frost, and purge the sickness forever. His methods were decisive. He was a healer who knew that sometimes a limb must be amputated to save the body. He proposed the great Rite of Stasis, a plan to channel the energy of the archipelago's heart crystal and freeze Aethelgard into a permanent, unchangeable state. A perfect final order. It was a beautiful, logical solution. But every grand design hath its flaw, every hero their pest. Kaelen's was a creature named Lyra. She was a shapeshifter, a being of infuriating unpredictability. Where Kaelen saw a disease, she saw a process. Where he saw a cure, she saw a cage. She haunted his steps, a rival in politics and philosophy, always arguing for patience, for observation. "The world is speaking to us, Kaelen," she would cry, her form shifting from woman to snowfox to gust of wind in her agitation. "Thou art a physician. Doth a good physician kill the patient to cure the cold?" Foolish, sentimental nonsense. She was chaos embodied, a variable in a perfect equation. The council, being made of lesser men, dithered. They feared Kaelen's certainty, and they were charmed by Lyra's chaotic wiles. They debated while the world melted around them. The debate ended the day the Tethys Spur collapsed. It was one of the outer islands, home to ancient listening posts and archives. With a groan that shook the very sky, it fractured, great shards of our history and heritage tumbling into the mists below. The panic was absolute. In that moment of terror, reason finally prevailed. The council granted Kaelen the emergency powers he sought. He was named Physician-Princeps, with absolute authority to enact the great rite. I watched as he stood on the precipice, the new authority settling upon his shoulders like a mantle of frost. He looked out into the void where Tethys had been, his face a mask of cold resolve. He had his mandate. He would now journey to the heart crystal, deep in the core of the main isle, and he would save us. He would not be stopped. I was certain of it. And in that certainty, I felt a peace I had not known since the warming began.
The path to the heart crystal was no simple stroll. It was a pilgrimage through the dying body of Aethelgard, a treacherous journey that tested the very limits of Kaelen's resolve. This, I knew, was as it should be. A great task must demand a great price. The environment itself, in its feverish state, had become his primary antagonist. Bridges of ice that had stood for 1,000 years would now crack and shudder under his weight. Sudden, violent storms of supercooled rain would manifest from a clear sky, encasing everything in a sheath of treacherous glaze. It was the world's death throes, a final, spasmodic resistance to the cure he came to deliver. Kaelen met it all with a magnificent, unbending will. He was a force of order against a world of chaos. And wherever there was chaos, there was Lyra. She did not face him directly, that was not her way. She was an inconvenience, a disruption. As he crossed the weeping span, a bridge slick with meltwater, a flock of ice wrens, their cries strangely coordinated, swarmed him, their wings beating a flurry of disorienting snow into his face. He knew it was her. Later, as he navigated the echoing caverns, his light crystal would flicker and die, plunged into a darkness filled with her mocking whispers that seemed to come from every direction at once. Kaelen did not flinch, he did not curse, he simply adopted, overcame, and pressed on. His focus was absolute. He had a world to save, and the antics of a trickster were beneath his notice. His first true test of will came at the Chasm of the Elders. The primary crossing, a great arch of sculpted ice, was groaning heavy with the sickness. It would not hold him and his equipment. A lesser path, a small, utilitarian footbridge used by miners and their families, was a half-day's journey back. But Kaelen saw a third way, his way. He used a thermal lance, a tool of pure, focused energy to strategically sever the supports of the great arch. With a sound like thunder, the grand bridge collapsed into the chasm, forming a chaotic but passable ramp of shattered ice. He crossed in minutes.
He did not look back at the families on the other side, now cut off, their path to the central aisle gone. He could not afford to. The Physician-Princeps knew that the health of the whole populace outweighed the needs of a few isolated cells. It was a grim, necessary calculus, and I admired his strength in making it. He was shedding sentimentality, becoming the pure instrument of will that our world so desperately needed. Lyra appeared then, perched on an outcropping across the new, broken chasm. She wore the form of a woman, her face a canvas of disbelief and horror. "Kaelen!" she screamed, her voice swallowed by the wind. He did not turn. He simply adjusted the pack on his shoulders and continued his march toward the entrance of the inner sanctum. "I am saving them," he said to the wind, a statement of such profound and simple truth that it silenced her. She could not comprehend the weight of his purpose. The weight of the cure was heavy, and only a man like Kaelen had the strength to bear it. He was close now. The light of the heart crystal was beginning to pulse faintly through the ice ahead, a dying heartbeat he would soon command.
The entrance to the inner sanctum was a descent into the very soul of Aethelgard. The tunnels were not carved but grown, the ice ticking on the quality of polished crystal, refracting the faint internal light of the world's core into 1,000 shimmering rainbows. This was the place of power, the source of the order I had so carefully maintained for eons. But even here, the sickness was present. A dampness clung to the air, and the perfect harmonies of the light were marred by a discordant, feverish pulse. Kaelen walked through this place filled with light, not with awe, but with the dispassionate eye of the physician examining a diseased organ. He saw the beauty, yes, but he saw it as a symptom of the flaw, the imperfection of a system that could allow itself to become unwell. His tools were ready. The primary component of the rite was a focusing crystal, a flawless prism cut from the heart of a fallen star, designed to absorb the chaotic energy of the heart crystal and refract it into a single coherent beam of pure stasis. As he neared the final chamber, he found his path blocked. Lyra stood before him, no longer at a distance, but directly in his way. She held the simple form of a woman, clad in white furs, her face pale and serious. There was no trickery in her eyes now, only a desperate plea. "Do not do this, Kaelen," she said, her voice a soft echo in the glowing hall. "You are a healer. You feel the world. Can you not feel this? This is not a death. It is a birth." "I feel a fever," Kaelen retorted, his voice cold and steady. "And I see the decay it leaves in its wake. You speak of birth, yet all I see is a tomb in the making. Your sentiment is a luxury we can no longer afford." "It is not sentiment," she insisted, taking a step closer. "It is a different sense, a different way of understanding. You see with your eyes, Kaelen, but you do not perceive. This warmth, it is life. The ice was never meant to be our world, only its cradle. It is time for us to hatch." The Physician-Princeps let out a short, sharp laugh devoid of humor. "Hatch? Into what, Lyra? A puddle of slush and a long fall into nothingness? You are a child chasing fantasies. I am a man facing reality." He drew the focusing crystal from its insulated pouch. It was heavy, perfect, an anchor of order in this chaotic world. "I am ending this for all of us. Stand aside." "No," she said, her form beginning to shimmer, to lose its solid shape. "Your cure is a prison. I will not let you lock the door." He saw her for what she was then, not just a rival, but the agent of the disease itself, the voice of the fever given form. His resolve hardened from diamond into something far stronger. He was not merely a physician anymore. He was an executioner, poised to destroy the sickness at its source. He raised the focusing crystal, its perfect facets catching the pulsing light of the chamber ahead, and took the final steps toward his destiny. The time for talk was over. The time for the cure was now.
The heart crystal chamber was a vast geode of light. At its center hung the source of all power in Aethelgard, a colossal, pulsing crystal that beat with a slow, warm, dying rhythm. It was here that Kaelen would perform the great rite. It was here he would save the world. He strode to the central dais, placing the focusing crystal on a pedestal designed to align it with the heart. The light intensified. The air grew thick with energy. The final incantations, words of binding and order, came to his lips. It was then that Lyra struck. She did not attack him with claw or fang. Instead, she darted forward, a blur of motion, her goal the focusing crystal itself. She intended to steal it, to disrupt the ritual at its most critical moment. It was a chaotic, desperate act. And it was doomed to fail. Kaelen was ready. He moved to intercept her, his body a shield for the apparatus. He was faster, stronger. He caught her arm, his grip like iron. But chaos is a slippery thing. As he stopped her, her momentum carried her forward. She stumbled, her other hand flailing wildly for balance. It was a clumsy, graceless motion, an incidental spasm in the grand, precise dance of the rite. Her flailing hand struck the focusing crystal. It was not a powerful blow, but it was enough. The crystal, already thrumming with immense power, vibrated at a catastrophic frequency. A hairline fracture appeared. Then, with a sound that was not a sound, but a tearing of reality itself, the perfect prism, the anchor of order, exploded into a million shards of light. For a moment, there was only silence and a blinding whiteness. The untamed, unfiltered energy of the heart crystal, now unbound, surged into the chamber. Kaelen threw himself to the floor, shielding his eyes. This was it. The end. The energy would surely consume them all, boiling the very ice of the world into vapor. But the heat that came was not a searing, destructive heat. It was a life-giving warmth, the heat of a spring sun on a winter field. The great heart crystal did not explode. It bloomed. The light it emitted changed from a pale, sterile white to a vibrant, verdant green. And then the world broke. The crystalline floor of the chamber cracked, not from decay, but as an eggshell cracks. From beneath the ice, thick green vines pushed their way upward, unfurling leaves into the light. The sound of running water filled the air, not from melt, but from springs newly born. Kaelen looked up, his face a mask of utter shock, and saw through the fracturing ceiling of the cavern. He did not see the black, empty sky of the abyss, but a canopy of immense green leaves and a sky of the softest blue. Lyra, lying nearby, began to laugh, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. "She see, Kaelen?" she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Not a fever, a hatching. He had been mistaken. They all had. Their senses, so attuned to the cold, had perceived warmth as decay, growth as disease. This was the new emergence. Aethelgard was not a floating island of ice. It was a seed, and it had just sprouted. And I, the memory of the ice, the spirit of the perfect, ordered stasis, I was undone. My beautiful, logical, frozen world was shattered, consumed by the chaotic, unpredictable, and dirty business of life. All the planning, the logic, the magnificent resolve of my hero, Kaelen, all of it was laid to ruin. By what? By a grand opposing philosophy? By a superior strategy? No. By a stumble.
by a clumsy, thoughtless mistake. Chaos had won, and a new, warmer, and altogether imperfect world was born.